Okay, good morning, everyone, and happy New Year to everybody, and hopefully it was a great New Year's Eve for everybody, and it'll be an even more wonderful 2023 for all. And I am an alcoholic. My name is David. Hello, and welcome to the main object Big Book study of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we're going to start off the meeting this morning by having our friend Donna read the AA preamble. And there you go, Donna.
There we go. Hi, good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. I am Donna, and I am an alcoholic. This is the AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Donna. And now I'm going to ask everybody to join me in inviting God into our meeting today by joining me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the
Accept the
things I
things I
cannot change,
cannot
the
change,
courage to
courage to
change the
change the
things
things
I
I
can,
can.
and the wisdom to know the difference. As most of you probably know, this is we are a line by line big book study. So, and what we do is we break the text down into, just for our own understanding to help share it with others, we break it down into 5 categories. And that's what we'll be doing today, although for the most part, today's reading will center on one of those 5. But the categories are questions, directions, explanations, promises, warnings, and history. For those categories, I highlight, and those are just colors, highlighter colors I chose. You can do whatever you want, but it helps me sort of grasp the message and, more importantly, share it with other people. And today we are on we're in the 4th edition, of course. We're on page 6 at the top there. The plan, if it goes according to plan, is to cover what I'm sort of calling the 5th section of Bill's story. And I call this remorse, horror, and hopelessness, which we'll see why we do that in a moment. And what I'll do today is share on the text. I'll go till about 7 o'clock a.m. Maybe get done a little quicker today, more quickly, because it is a short section. We're really only covering 2 paragraphs, but there is so much, I think, meat here that there'll be a lot of room for discussion. And if we kind of sputter out of fuel with that, we'll just continue on and we'll jump into section 6. So with this, just to keep in mind a couple things in this section, section 5. What we're going to see in this part of the narrative is Bill's life is now completely dominated by his drinking. He's not only lost his position and with any kind of brokerage firm or any kind of uh, gainly employment. Um, he has lost all that. He's lost his place in society. He has also, I think, uh, kind of even more devastatingly, he's lost his connection to the person he aspired to be. Remember, this was the guy who was a short time ago envisioned himself as Napoleon, and in golf he was going to overtake Walter Hagen, and so that ego has really collapsed at this point. Um, and even though his downfall will continue. He's not done like on that downward trajectory yet, scarily enough. But one of the things that we'll see as we are um, going into the text is that he's also, they talk about building an arch through which to pass a free man. And Bill, even in this downward trajectory, is laying the foundation for the mindset that will ultimately save him. And what I noticed is that there are sort of three pillars or three commitments to that. And we will talk about one of them today. The second one we'll talk about probably next week, and then the third one's coming up. So, and let me just touch base on actually come back to that first one. So if we look at the first one, the first pillar, I think that at least I needed in order to get sober was this notion of high resolve. Now, high resolve alone did not allow me to get sober, and it certainly is not keeping me sober. But I think I can see in my program how at least it was one pillar. And Bill talks about that actually in the previous section. He said, "Where had my high resolve been?" And he talked about making commitments and pledges and things like that. And while that alone will not allow me to stay sober, I do believe that it is an important, it's like one leg of the stool. Just like a stool cannot stand on one leg alone, um, you still need all three legs in order to have stability. And so high resolve is the first of those um, commitments. And what high resolve really gets to is the willingness. They talk about honesty, open mindedness, and willingness. And I see high resolve as the willingness to adopt a solution to our problem. And just also, before I jump into the text, I want to put out there sort of three questions to think about as we're reading today. Because Bill is really, Bill was a low bottom drunk. We know that. And a lot of us these days, because of various things, a lot of us these days come into Alcoholics Anonymous not having experienced the kind of low bottom devastation that Bill experienced. At the same time, I could see in my own story many of the precursors to what Bill is experiencing. So, as we're reading today, whether you were a low bottom drunk or not, try to keep the following in mind. Did I ever get to the point in my drinking where all hope was lost? If so, what was that like? If not, what saved me from that? And I can say flat out, for me, it was my parents that saved me from that. And but that's a whole other story. But moving onward, question two. Bill is now, we're at a point where Bill is now drinking to survive. He appears to be living almost like an animal. In what ways, big or small, did I experience something similar? And then thirdly, a doctor comes to give Bill a sedative to calm his nerves and taper off alcohol. Yet Bill later uses this same sedative, not to taper off, but to keep drinking. So, in what ways did I either misuse or manipulate help from others to avoid facing my problems or my alcoholism? And with that, I'm going to jump in on, again, I'm on page 6. I'm at the first full paragraph there. And just to make it easy for everybody, everything that I'm reading today in those first two paragraphs, those two paragraphs on 6 and on to the top of 7, I have highlighted in pink as a warning. So the remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably. There was an terrible sense of impending calamity. And I think I put it in there. Did I put it in there? Yes. I went to my 1939 dictionary to look up just to make sure I understood the term calamity. And they define it as any cause that produces evil, disaster, or extreme misfortune. So that's not a huge stretch from our understanding, but so Bill had this sort of free floating, overwhelming sense of anxiety and doom. I hardly dare cross the street, lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. An all night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My writhing nerves were stilled at last. And I thought again, there is a word writhing that we don't use in common language a lot. So I looked it up again, and it just said twisting with violence. So what I imagined was almost like when you get like a dish towel or something, and you're like wringing it out, and you're really trying to get the water out, and you might be like jerking it as you twist it, and like that's what was going on with Bill's nerves. So again, it's that collapse of everything that Bill had looked to in order to manage his life, really. You know, we talk about our lives were unmanageable, and another way of thinking about that is all the tools and strategies that we used to manage our lives began to consistently fail us. And that's what we see happening with Bill. And that's what I can relate to myself. Just my own little strategies, my own little sort of self management tools, my own little theories and ideas about life. It was all falling apart. It no longer worked for me. And not only that, not only did it not work, not only did it give me failure, but whenever I would try to look to those things or lean on them, they created even more disaster than what I started out with. So my own problem solving, which I was so fond of, even when I first got sober, my life's a flaming train wreck, and I'm thinking, I come into meetings and I hear people talk about how defeated they were and how they couldn't manage life. And I thought, wow, too bad for these people. They don't have, or they didn't have the kind of problem solve. Now, mind you, I'm like a week and a half sober. You know, my life is like, I tend to refer to it as this mobile Jerry Springer show. And I'm saying to myself, wow, too bad these people don't have the problem solving skills I have. And so moving on, a morning paper told me the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. Now remember, just a page or two before this, Bill is talking about hearing about men jumping from the high towers of finance, and that disgusted him because he had that will to fight. And that's gone. That's been extinguished. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? No, not now. See, remember, people jumping out of windows just a page or two before disgusted Bill. But now he's entertaining that option. And what he's saying is, no, He's not saying definitively no. He's saying just not now. And I can relate to that. Not today. I remember waking up thinking, is today the day that I'm going to do it? I'm going to kill myself. And obviously, I would always decide not today. These last two lines really hit me hard. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that. So, 2 bottles and oblivion. One of the things that really jumped out at me is I always sort of breezed through those lines. But I took some time and I really went through them slowly, and I realized Bill was saying something very different than what I assumed he had been saying all these years. A mental fog settled down. He had this mental fog. We've all probably had the mental fog. We get up in the morning before we have that first cup of tea or coffee or whatever, and we're in like a mental fog. And he's saying, I was in a mental fog, but then it settled down. And which is something that we would want to happen. We would want the mental fog to settle down. But what does Bill say? Gin would fix that. I was starting to think more clearly. I needed to fix that. Because I think what was happening was the reality of Bill's situation would come rushing in. And it would be too much for him to handle. And 2 bottles, gin of remember, he's doing this bathtub stuff, and oblivion. The goal for Bill at this point is oblivion. And you think like, man, how could anybody handle a day or an hour of that? And then we learn it, for Bill it went on much longer. The mind and body are marvelous mechanisms, for mine endured this agony for 2 more years. Sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse when the morning terror and madness were on me. Again I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. And I can relate to that so much. One of the things I picked up about that, though, was, interestingly, one of the things that Bill is you would think when someone's this low, how can they not be open to or willing to pursue a different solution? Well, first of all, I mean, there really wasn't an alternate solution for Bill at this point. But he was still kind of locked into and grasping on this thing about strength and resolve. So he's cursing himself for being a weakling, meaning that because he is weak, that is part of the problem. And here in AA, one of the principles we work by is our weakness, our powerlessness actually saves us. So there were flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. And again, that was a line I just breezed through for years. But then I thought about it. And just think about this for a second. Because when I tell my story, I often thought about, for several years there, for about 3 or 4 years, I tried to perfect the art of the geographic cure. And so what they're really talking about is the geographic cure. And they sought escape. And what did they seek escape from? And it seems like it could be a variety of things. But one of the things that seems clear is that the escape that they were trying to seek, or at least Bill was trying to seek, was from external conditions. It could be, now remember at this point, we've already read up to this point that Bill had sort of a short fuse. and he was always getting into fights with taxi cab drivers and whatnot. And so my guess is that it was disaster upon disaster upon disaster. And then came the night when the physical and mental torture was so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window, sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor, lest I suddenly leap. A doctor came with a heavy sedative. I just want to pause momentarily and just say, at this point, I think what, if it's not clear to us at this point, I think it's there's ample evidence to say that at this point, Bill is very, very much living like an animal. It's all, it seems like his existence at this point is totally impulse driven, and he is very much drinking to survive. Kathy, I see your hand. Yeah, please.
Yeah. I don't know if it's appropriate right now to jump in, but when you mentioned about the settling of the fog, mental fog, what occurred to me was um, the fog was reality setting in for him. And he didn't want that. And that's the reach for the gin and the escape. But in this next paragraph, at least what jumped off to me, or jumped out at me, was he talks about the flights from cities. My wife and I sought escape. To my mind, that's when this family disease starts to really dig in, because she's gone right along with him to escape, whatever that may look like. Um, I don't know. I don't know if that's important to anybody, but I feel like th- that's the introduction to really see she's as sick as he is at this point, because he married her, them both together as they escaped in that line.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you for that. Um, I also thought of that. I just want to comment. I thought of that at the same point, maybe just a tad bit earlier than that, when he has to leave Montreal. And his comment to that is, "This time we stayed broke. I created this disaster, devastated our lifestyle, and we stayed broke." So, and there's a lot of reasons why that, given the times and the economy and so forth, why that makes sense. So anyway, a doctor came with a heavy sedative. Next day found me drinking both gin and sedative. This combination landed me on the rocks. Okay, I'm going to jump. If you look, do I have it in the notes? I thought I had it in the notes. Oh, hold on, I'll put it there. I looked up the phrase "on the rocks." Interesting metaphor Bill uses, because, of course, that the notion of "on the rocks" it pertains also to a way you might drink a drink of alcohol, but it also is experiencing severe difficulties and likely soon to come to an end, like all the wheels are falling off. Now, while obviously we are working in the fourth edition, and I've never been one to say, like, okay, let's look at the original or let's look at the manuscript to find out, like, the real meaning, because for me the real meaning is in the published volume. However, there are places where, especially in Bill's story, where the original draft really gives us some insight, and so I'm going to post it right now. I found a copy of the original draft online, and I put the link there in the chat. But just this last section that we just read, the doctor comes, gives him a sedative. The sedative, by the way, I looked up was does he mention it here? He doesn't mention the specific sedative, but it was something called chloral hydrate, which I think I put it in there a little further up. It's a powerful sedative that at one time was used for sedation in asylums and in general medical practices. It also became a popular drug of abuse in the late 19th century. Interestingly, because he says, the next morning found me drinking both gin and sedative. It's not necessarily a pill. It might be a powder that you can mix in water or whatever. And so it was soluble with both water and ethanol, readily forming concentrated solutions. And a little further down in the chat, I have from Bill's original draft. This is what Bill originally wrote before it was edited. And that is, this relieved me so much that the next day found me drinking apparently without the usual penalty if I took some sedative occasionally. So that meant that if he ingested the sedative, he could, just like people talk about, like sometimes they use drugs because it allowed them to prolong their drinking. And we see that very much with Bill. In the early spring of 1934, it became evident to everyone concerned that something had to be done, and very quickly. So, and then back to the 4th edition text, we're at the top there. Next day found me drinking both gin and sedative. This combination soon landed me on the rocks. People feared for my sanity. So did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking. I was 40 pounds underweight. We've all seen pictures of Bill. He was not a heavy guy normally anyway. So imagine that minus 40 pounds. He probably looked like a skeleton at this point. He was probably like the Walking Dead at this point. So with that, oh wow, we are right at 7 o'clock. So with that, I'd like to just open it up on any thoughts about this and how you relate to it. And even if you haven't experienced the physical consequences the way Bill has, did you see some of those same dynamics in your own life and drinking? So I'd be curious to hear what people's experience is. And Chris, I see your hand, please.
Good morning. Thanks so much, David. Thanks everybody for being here. And the reason I'm here is I have a great desire for this way of life, and I love being able to plug in with all of you. But I was at a Hope, and I wrote some things down just because when this stuff comes up, it really jacks me up. So I'll try to be quick with this. But yes, definitely all hope was lost. And for me, it often came in the form of jumping out of the window in a doctor's office, cruise ship, bridges, wherever I was. I wanted to jump. What saved me was a power greater than myself, though I didn't see it or know it at the time. So yes, my anxiety treated with meds, and I'd asked the doctors, how much can I safely drink with this? And they said, well, figure it doubles the effect. I thought, oh, well, it's not affecting me. So, going through this part of it, it's like, I am so incredibly grateful to be alive and to be able to spend most of my day where my feet are. It's remarkable to me, but that's what this process does. I remember at one point thinking if I could only kill part of myself, and I just surrendered to the drink because I couldn't, I was so split, and I believe I always had a great desire to be whole, but I didn't know how to do that. And I did live like an animal. Sex with anybody was frequently locked up. I left my ex because I thought I was going to kill him. But I very much like an animal and all run on instinct. For a long time, I blamed the mental health system, and oh, thank God. So was 3 years ago, completely was at a loss. And I was going to be arrested if I didn't agree to be locked up once again. But I wasn't drinking, but I was not living this. And after that hospitalization, thank God, it was a program where they brought mind, body, spirit together. When I got over that, and it was a 3-month process, but I was able to hear and see what I couldn't before, and was able to start practicing and living this a day at a time. So anyway, I'm just incredibly grateful, and to be able to look at this and say, what, just say this is what happened, but what it's like now is I get up in the morning and I say, please help me with this day. And thank you. Because boy, it's my life. I just can't even believe that's my story, but it is. I thank God for today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chris. Just so in case people are wondering, because there have been notes in the comment, people are wondering about, can they copy and paste them? And I think what you can do is highlight and copy and then put it onto a Word document or something like that. But in addition, all the notes that I post in the chat today will be reposted in the video that we have of each session. So that'll be up on YouTube later today. And just if you haven't checked it out, just know it's audio only. There's no visuals. So we are remaining within the traditions. I see Linda's hand up, but I also saw that earlier Joe had his hand up. Joe, I didn't know if you wanted to comment or not.
Oh, yeah, Dave. I was just, I just put my hand down in the interest of time. I'm not sure how much time we got, but just quickly, he says he wanted, 2 bottles, right? And oblivion, is the state of forgetting. That's what it took him to forget 2 bottles. And it was same for me, maybe even a gallon every 36 hours. I'm just, identifying with Bill, and the mental torture was so hellish, meaning miserable, abominable, execrable. I mean, these words like hellish is a horrible way to live. And you had mentioned that he was the doctor gave him some sedatives. When I went to the hospital, they gave me Librium for the delirium tremors, and they made a mistake of giving me a prescription for it, and I went and filled it, and I got 30 pills. And Nikki's on this call too. Nikki met me. I was jacked down on Librium and alcohol. My feet swole up. I couldn't wear any shoes, and I was walking around in socks in the rain wherever and sleeping wherever I could. I had basically lost my mind. And the same thing, I couldn't cross the street either because I couldn't judge the speed of the vehicles that were coming. And when my sponsor found me in that state, or when we got together in that state, he helped me sleep it off, and then the work started. Anyway, that's my quick story compared to Bill's. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And Linda, please.
Hi, good morning. I'm Linda, alcoholic. Just briefly, I suffered rather severe episodes of AFib when I was drinking. And it took years for me to finally make the connection between those episodes and times of very heavy drinking and stress. And it was a doctor's remark after several of these events to say, well, you don't look like an alcoholic. And he dismissed that. And so the consequences, now that I'm not drinking, if I have an episode, it's very mild and my heart converts on its own within a short period of time. But, I'm now faced with a lifetime of taking blood thinners and heart medication that I don't want to be on. But, a doctor will say, well, do you want to risk having a major episode and having a stroke? Oh, of course not. But I found that I had to educate some cardiologists at one point after I made that connection. So it's just one of the consequences now that I have to live with. But thank God, my life's no longer at that great risk. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Linda. One of the things that I thought about was, as we were reading, was near the end of my drinking, probably about a year or so before I was able to get sober. I was, I remember being drunk, and I remember being out with my girlfriend at the time, and I was dating this girl. We had been in a long-term relationship, like 4 or 5 years, and it was really going south at this time for a variety of reasons, many of which had directly to do with my alcoholism. And I remember it was myself, my girlfriend, and one of her best friends, and I was just like a mood came over me, and I became very irritated at something my girlfriend said. And I remember I spun around, and I can't even remember what I said to her, but I spun around and like I leaned in, and I kind of wanted to emphasize my point. And when I spun around and I leaned into her, she and her friend stepped back, and they had this look in their eye. And it was, and I'm as drunk as I was at this moment. This is 30 whatever years later, and I can't get out of my mind. I still can't get out of my mind. The look they had in their eye was the look that you would have if you suddenly found yourself cornered by a wild animal. And I could see that, and I thought of myself as sort of this mellow, happy-go-lucky guy. And I remember this thought coming through my drunken state: you are not the person you used to be. And having no idea how I got from point A to that point, but feeling powerless to change it. We've got about 5 minutes left. And so, are there any other thoughts or comments, anything on this section? Yeah, Kathy, please.
Well, this is just one of my girlfriends in the program, and I forget what the acronym is or the initials are, works with professionals, healthcare professionals, in order to tie these things together. Alcoholism, not this brief overview that they get perhaps in med school or whatever, and the alcoholic that's coming to the office. And I was asked to sit in on a couple of these sessions. And but that link, with so many of us just sharing, and I have a similar story where I was given an anti-anxiety med, and it could have killed me, really. It really could have killed me. But that link that we all have managed to experience here, and we all interact with our own doctors. I don't know if everyone here knows, but I didn't know until recently that we do have service positions that actually take on that job of being this conduit to information to medical professionals to say, here's what really happens when you prescribe this and you're not probing to see if this person's truly an alcoholic. My big symptom, if you will, was high blood pressure and a tongue tremor. And they wrote me a script like you wouldn't believe to calm my nerves, So it's just a thought to throw out there, if it touches your heart, that may be a service opportunity for some of us that experience something like that. Because I know for me, I would have died if I continued on that.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Since we just have about 2 or 3 minutes left, I'm going to sort of I'll leave it there because the next section, we could go into the next section. I'll just give you some like highlights of coming attractions with it though. But the next section is a little bit longer, and I'd rather address that as a full piece because the next section, section 6, is called quicksand, and that goes from the top of page 7 there through near the bottom of page 8. So most of page 8 there. That's section 6. And there we see that Bill meets Dr. Silkworth. He ends up through his brother-in-law, Lois's brother, and also Bill's own mother, who happened to be, they don't talk a lot about Bill's mother, but Bill's mother was sort of a trailblazer. She was an osteopathic physician, and they end up putting him in Towns Hospital, and where he meets Dr. Silkworth, and he gains tremendous knowledge, self-knowledge, about the disease and the working of his mind. And that self-awareness really ends up forming the second commitment that allows Bill to build the foundation to get sober. But we'll talk about that next week. So any closing comments before we... I don't have anything. Yes, sir, Mr. John.
Hey, John Age Alcoholic. I'm so grateful to be here this morning because I've been writing down. My experience was not like Bill W.'s before I stopped drinking. And it's been such a cloud to me. Why did I stop? It's still a cloud, but I started writing down more, and answers are coming to me. And I just think it's a miracle for me that my higher power led me to these rooms, because my denial was so strong. And as I'm writing this, to me, the stock market crash was COVID of 2020, but things started getting better in 2021, and I was drinking even more. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, John M., please.
Morning. My name's John. I'm an alcoholic, and we've all been through this horrendous mental and physical state at various times, sometimes for years. And it just occurred to me that Bill's preparing an essential part of his recovery, and that's he's on his way to his bottom. That's what it is. That's what's happening to him. We all experienced it. And when we're getting sober, we reflect back, or I did, on my various bottoms, you might say. As time went along, things just got worse and worse. My nerves were shot. And I actually was in a bar on the way to my parents' house. I just couldn't make it there. I got into the bar. I got on the phone. I called my parents' house, and I said, I think I'm going crazy. Come and get me. And my father and my brother-in-law drove to the bar. And my brother-in-law got in my car and drove it, and my father took me home to his place. And before we got there, he was taking his time, and I was so racked. My nerves were so racked. He didn't make a light that I wanted him to make to get me home. I jumped out of the car while it was moving. One of the bottoms I think about that was essential. Can't get sober until you hit your bottom. So that's just one of them along the way. Thanks for letting me share.
John, thank you so much. And then in closing, I'm going to also remind folks that Good Morning Avalon is, I believe, they are now at this very moment open for business. So if you're in the mood for another meeting, come on over. We have a Big Book Promises meeting this morning, and wonderful group. And with that, I'm going to thank you all for being here. And we have a nice way of closing. If you want to unmute and join me in the Lord's Prayer.